issues. Today, ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of the annual lecture is to create a platform to discuss, debate, raise awareness of the importance of utilizing indigenous knowledge system when examining gender issues and dismantling thereof. The Institute aims to take advantage of this opportunity to open a conversation that will support bottom-up participation that is successful and impactful, beneficial to communities, and long-lasting. We intend to accomplish this through igniting a global movement that supports gender equality, addresses gender-related challenges, and unearths indigenous knowledge. The Institute for Gender Studies' most essential goal is to start an ongoing conversation with the young academics and the youth to encourage studies that applies indigenous methodologies and the suitability of feminist and gender-based methods. The Institute for Gender Studies responds positively to the catalytic niche area of the BESI, where we talk about Busati, womanism, feminism, theorization. Ladies and gentlemen, our first annual lecture will be presented by Professor BESI MUHONJA of James Madison University. She will be our first speaker, where she addresses Maathai Womanism, a decolonial imagining of eco-agential personhood. Her research focuses on Wangari Maathai, feminist theory, decolonial and indigenous knowledges, critical African studies, Africana, transnational, and subaltern feminism. She's also interested in queer and maternity studies. Today, we're going to have a feast by Professor BESI MUHONJA. Thank you very much, Program Director, for allowing me to welcome all the participants and open our first annual public lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Nkosi, for welcoming us, as well as sharing the realities of girls and women in South Africa and our role as the Institute for Gender Studies in these challenges, and for giving us a context for this public lecture. Thank you so much. I'm now going to ask Ms. Langa, who is the Deputy Chairperson for the UNISA Women's Forum, to give us some reflections on Women's Month for this year. Over to you, Ms. Langa. Ms. Langa, you're on mute.
Good evening, colleagues. I would like to take this time and really appreciate this opportunity that I'm given by the Institute of Gender Studies. And when I was given this platform, where I was asked to reflect on 2022 Women's Month, one of the things that was of importance was the issue of patriarchy. And I looked at it and I asked, where is this patriarchy going and when did it start? Because I'm an interested person in terms of learning more about women and our history. I found out that patriarchy was planted by colonialists, those who came to Africa to colonize us. Then, therefore, it was planted then, because countries like Angola and Nigeria, they allowed women to be in power at that time. And where are we now as the country in terms of patriarchy? What I can say is that we are trying as the country, we are trying to move forward, but there is brutality in terms of women who are in higher position. They are still brutally treated. And it gives us that as women, especially in Women's Forum at UNISA, we have a duty to play in our institution, in our country, in our continent, as we are the biggest institution in Africa, where we would actually sensitize women, where we say we need to rebuild these walls that are broken. We need to reconstruct what we believe in as Africans, even before the colonialists came in our continent. In terms of this month, what I've seen is that there is a cry, and I believe that the spirit of Professor Maathai may come to South Africa and anyway and teach us as young women and teach those women who are already in leadership that it's not about them giving up, because most of women, they've got skills, they've got passion, they've got knowledge, but you find out they are scared of taking leading position in organization because of brutality that they will experience the moment they assume those offices. In terms of politics, in South Africa, we are still far, because as we are now in the 28th year where we got liberated, but it's still difficult to get either a president or a deputy president in our country who is a woman, who is trusted to lead. And when I read about Maathai didn't care of the pressures that she got from the outside. What she focused on was to rebuild and deconstruct what has been done before. So that the Africa as a whole, so that Kenya as a whole may be able to contribute, especially women, in socio-economic matters of her country and also of Africa. In terms of peace, what I have seen, because last week I had an opportunity where I had to speak of peace and social inclusion. In terms of peace, there is no peace at all. That's my reflection. I don't sense peace where a woman will occupy a position and everybody is relaxed and everybody is happy and everybody is supporting that particular woman. But what I see, they make sure, the other gender make sure that still we feel mistreated, we feel small in such position and we doubt ourselves, of which I think it's still a long walk to freedom for us women in Africa especially. I think the issue of womanism, people have taken it some other way. They are not respecting the fact that women are able to do what at some time, to acknowledge women's natural contribution in our society. Because our leading doesn't only start in the streets, it starts from home, where we make decisions, where we have to organize, where we have to communicate, where we have to take care of our kids, taking care of people. It's us women who are taking care. It's us who are taking care of these men. That is what I can say. But this lady, when I read about her, she went through a lot. Professor Maathai went through a lot. Divorce, family problems, and also he went through a lot in politics where after she won his Nobel Prize, she was taken to prison over something that was not true about her. And I think this is why women even today are still brutally treated and are still feel like slaves. That's what I can say. Then if you're a woman and in higher position and in academic, you have to work as a slave to prove to men that you can do it as a woman, of which that is, as Africans, we need to correct that. And how do we do that? I think we need to unite as women. It has to start with us, where we do not undermine each other in our position, where we give women respect that we give to men, when they are in higher position. The support that we give in politics, it should be the support when a woman in South Africa, when a woman in Africa opens a political party. We need to support that woman. We need, because we are the majority, but unfortunately still, we still allow men to lead us by supporting them instead of supporting women. That is my reflection. And the killing of women is motivated also by us, women, by allowing men to treat us as they please. Either at workplace, either at our homes, either in society, we allow them. And I think it is time for us now, women, to say we can do. I can go to mine. I can go and do the work that men do. Because when we look, I don't even, like when I was reading and I hear that the issue of patriarchy was introduced by those from the Western countries, and I was like, what then are we decolonizing if this thing was with us from the beginning? If then we say we are decolonizing, why then do we keep on talking instead of implementing what we're talking about? That is my take. So going forward, I think as a person in Women's Forum and Women's Forum as a whole, we are going to try by all means to make sure that we visit each and every office that is led by a woman, so that we can find out what are they experiencing in those positions. By these words, I would like to give you the closure. It's a quote. I don't know the author, but he says, he says, in the course of history, there comes a time when humanity is called to shift to a new level of consciousness, to reach a higher moral ground, a time when we have to share our fear and give hope to each other. That time needs not to be postponed, but it has to be now. I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Langa, for your reflections on Women's Month 2022. We are going to swiftly move on with the program now, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to ask Ms. Khamamati, who is the Deputy President of the National Student Representative Council, to please come forward and read Professor MUHONJA's biography before she makes her presentation. Over to you, Ms. Mati.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Greetings to you and everybody in the room and those that are watching from abroad, and to all our students. It gives me such a great pleasure to be able to introduce Professor BESI BRILLIAN MUHONJA this evening. We look forward to drinking from the fountain of knowledge and a giant of her caliber. Her bio reads as follows. Dr. BESI MUHONJA is the Associate Vice Provost for Scholarship and Research Development in the Office of Research and Scholarship at James Madison University. She holds a faculty appointment in the Department of English as Professor of African, African American, and Diaspora Studies and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. Prior to joining the RNS team, Dr. MUHONJA served as director of the AAAG Studies Center. She contributes to the JMU community, has been recognized with various awards, including Woman of Distinction, Provost Award for Excellence in Inclusivity, Edna T. Schleifer Humanist Award, Provost Faculty Diversity Curriculum Grant, Summer Research Grant, Educational Leave, Diversity Enhancement Award, and Feminist Scholarship. Dr. MUHONJA's work engages the interfaces of transnationalism, gender, and sexualities in politics, identities, philosophies, and products from Africa, the larger global South, and the Black diaspora. Using interdisciplinary and decolonial approaches, she studies and teaches critical African studies, critical race studies, critical transnational feminism, queer studies, Ubuntu, and motherhood studies. She is also a leading Wangari Maathai scholar. Dr. MUHONJA is the author of Radical Utu, Ideas and Ideals of Wangari Maathai, Ohio University Press, 2020, Performing Girlhood and Womanhood, Rituals of Kenya's 21st Century Middle Class, Lexington, Roman and Littlefield, 2018. She's also the co-editor of the volumes Gender and Sexuality in Senegalese Societies, Critical Perspectives and Methods with Babakar Mbaye, 2019, Mothers and Sons, Centering Mother Knowledge with Wanda Bernard Thomas, 2016, and Gender and Sexuality in Kenyan Societies, Centering the Human and the Humane in Critical Studies with Babakar Mbaye, 2022. She is a series editor of the academic book series Critical African Studies in Gender and Sexuality and serves on the editorial advisory boards of various journals and organizations. She has edited 3 issues of major peer-reviewed journals of critical African and gender studies, including West Africa Review and Gender, a journal of culture and African women studies. Additionally, she has published over 25 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters, logging over 50 academic conference presentations and public lectures at major institutions in the United States of America and abroad. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me the opportunity to present to you Professor BESI BRILLIAN MUHONJA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sister Marty. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Thank you, Sister Marty, and thank you everyone for having me here. And I just want to say, Sister Langa, your passion was so deeply moving. I do miss being on the continent with powerful women like all of those that have just spoken before me. I'd like to say asanteni, thank you to you all. Thank you for having me, my brother, my friend, Dr. Itumeleng and Hokatso, the Institute for Gender Studies and UNISA leaders for having me. It is unfortunate that I should have been there physically for the whole week this week, but that did not work out. But I really am grateful that you figured out a way to accommodate me anyway. I'm especially excited about what my brother did not share, some of the conversations we're having about partnerships between our 2 institutions. And so today I deliver greetings from our Provost and Senior Vice President, Dr. Heather Coltman, and the Vice Provost for Research and Scholarship at JMU, Dr. Anthony Tongen, and the rest of our team. I was asked to speak for 30 minutes, and I will try. And I'm going to ask my brother to share his screen because I'm more familiar with Zoom and WebEx, and I forget I'm aging, so new technology sometimes is not my strongest point, and so he will be sharing the slides on my behalf. So my younger brother will share his screen now. They told me to speak for 30 minutes. I will try to do that. As I read this, I'm going to have to make some requests of you. Please do not use the colonial anthropological lens of looking at Africans as closer to nature and so primitive, so to speak. That's not what this is. I'm going to speak about our connection to the land and environment. I am not invoking that, so do not use Eurocentric lens as I speak. Do not apply those. I'm also going to say that while I talk mostly about men and women in this presentation, please do not read this as me privileging those 2 genders. That is just the context of this work. So I'm always so honored, so privileged to do the work that I do on Professor Wangari Maathai. May she rest well. We honor her. We stand on her shoulders. There is no doubt that she remains one of Africa's most recognized and celebrated activists across the globe. The problem here is in most accounts, the scholar and critical thinker are forgotten as we celebrate the activist, who should be celebrated absolutely. And the activist is often very narrowly celebrated. In my work, I look mostly on Wangari Maathai as the scholar or the scholar activist. So as I speak, I will share on screen some quotes from Professor Maathai on doing decolonized humane scholarship and centering African thought systems, but also just so you can hear her own words. Slide. I have been asked severally by many people to go back to this work and share it. So this is old work actually that I have just updated precisely because a lot of people who've spoken to me have felt like I forgot about it too soon. And so many of you might be familiar with this work with a few tweaks here and there. This opportunity to go back to the work was provided by my brother Itu, inviting a presentation on decolonizing gender studies. It is allowing me to revisit this work, but also to refamiliarize myself with it for the next book on Maathai that I'm working on. At the end of my presentation, in lieu of questions, I would welcome that people share in 2 minutes or less. I know some of you like to speak a lot. In 2 minutes or less, I would like that in lieu of questions, you share your own experiences in applying decolonial approaches in gender studies so we can learn from each other. Professor Maathai was committed to moving beyond ideas of ideas to establishing pathways to praxis. Professor Maathai was committed to the idea of many directions of learning. So not just one direction, me speaking, you listening. Professor Wangari Maathai was committed to disruption. In this case, I would really appreciate it if we could disrupt the mode of presenter, then people ask questions and I respond. Rather, I would prefer that we learn from each other. And so I would like at the end for you to share your own practices of decolonizing the academy. I'm especially doing this for the benefit of the graduate students in the room and other students, so we can all share collectively the work that we're doing. Let us learn from each other. I also chose to revisit this presentation and this work to honor the choice of the Institute for Gender Studies to host this event in August in honor of another group of women with the same ideals, the women of the Women's March, because what they did and what Professor Wangari Maathai stood by were very similar. Slide. Maathai was interested in understanding the world through the lens of Ubuntu, what it means to be human, what she called qualities that are supposed to set human beings apart from other occupiers of the universe. Maathai opined that the values and strategies for processes towards empowerment for women of Africa and women in general would have to consider decolonial indigenous ways of being, doing, and knowing. Slide. The approach, delivering agency to women to act and influence the realities of their natural and man-made environments. Harmony and balance between environments and people for her and for all of us, as we know, had been ensured by indigenous African societal beliefs, practices grounded in Utu. Slide. Failure to sustain that knowledge and with it, the complementary relationship between human and environment has compromised the location of women and by extension, all people in society. Their humanity, whether they were privileged or underprivileged, is thus compromised. Today, I use the location of women to demonstrate Professor's thoughts. However, I invite you all to apply this to all bodies and consider how compromising the environment and so the humanity of one person or one group of persons compromises the humanity of all. As I do remember the great Desmond Tutu opining, it is impossible to dehumanize one human being without putting your own humanity in question, which is probably one of the best definitions of Ubuntu that I've ever had. In various interviews, the professor reflected on her upbringing and the capacity of mothers, women to relate to and harness their environment to provide for families. These conditions of the well-functioning ecosystems consisting of social and physical environments sustaining humans and the humans sustaining them was starkly different from the imbalance experienced by grassroots women Maathai worked with. It was the restoration of such a natural and cultural ecosystem that she sought as a pathway to women's liberation and saw all people's liberation. Slide, please. Her approach was rooted in two ideals. One, it is decolonial. Two, it has to be eco-directed and informed. Establishing decolonial eco-agency, what I call eco-agency, decolonial eco-agency, would start with decolonizing the people's self-definition and their liberation movements. By applying the lens of Utu, Ubuntu, and indigenous thought systems, including environmental wisdom. Slide, please. The departure Professor encouraged was from Western typecasts of Africans, promoted and sustained by, quote, internationalization of Western cultures, patronizing and exploitative conceptions of Africans, end quote, and their environments. This decolonial African responsiveness to rebalancing societies engenders respect for all Watu, people, and Utu, humanity, humanness, personhood. It calls for recognizing women primarily as equal humans before highlighting their womanhood. So let's talk about human, not woman. It is conceivable that Maathai's focus on people rather than women is why she appeared to prefer using the expression human rights to feminism. She defined female identities that were not petri-centered or petri-defined. She contested gendered constructions and expectations on her person and identity, asserting, quote, I had never thought of myself as an African woman. I had never thought of myself as a woman. For me, the limit was my capacity, my capability, end quote. Her actions grounded in such contestation prompted calls by some critics, including Kenya's then President Moi and other government officials, for her to perform her womanhood in acceptable ways. Moi and his cohort directed other women to manage Maathai, who was stepping out of line as a woman. In one nationally televised speech, the president called on women to discipline Maathai, who was transgressing societal rules by not acting like a woman and not showing the requisite respect to men. In a number of other occurrences, her disparagers presented her as causing other women to act as not women, in effect jettisoning their proper and acceptable womanhood in accordance with patriarchal constructions. This reluctance of Maathai to privilege gender is captured in her response to an MP who, as a way of putting her in a place as a woman, threatened to circumcise her if she ever visited Rift Valley province. Her rejoinder to this was, quote, I am sick and tired of men who are so incompetent that every time they feel the heat because women are challenging them, they have to check their genitalia to reassure themselves. I'm not interested in that part of the anatomy, end quote. She added, quote, the issues I'm dealing with require the utilization of what's above the neck. If you don't have anything there, leave me alone, end quote. This figuration erases focus on the body parts below the neck, where biology may indicate physical differences. By focusing on the region above the neck, Maathai forces an erasure of feminizing women as a public standard. Additionally, she highlights the equal intellectual capacity of women to men. The following quote exemplifies the Utu, personhood, not Uke, femininity or womanhood, quality of her approach to the rights of women. Quote, we are dealing with the rights of the public and the rights of people. These are the kinds of issues that require the anatomy of whatever lies above the neck, end quote. Maathai's work with the Green Belt movement equally focalized female members of society as individuals and collectives acting upon their environments, but without locating the GBM as an exclusively women's movement. She presented the movement as inclusive. Slide, please. She refused to position the women in a struggle against men. Like with the Green Belt movement, Respect for Utu in indigenous Kenyan communities allowed female members of society's autonomy, but also processes of resistance where necessary. It is important to note that in indigenous African societies, such protest power was not enjoyed by women because they were women, but because they held and occupied certain identities and roles which were respected and revered. And resources controlled by those bodies came to bear and supported the women. An example of this would be the mother body, which women across African cultures have used and continue to use in resistance. And Maathai and others have done as well, if we all remember the Release Political Prisoners campaign. Today, I focus on some of the aspects that Maathai historicized as the root causes of the loss of this power women enjoyed, and with it, the public reduction. And thank you, Sister Langa, for pointing out the colonial encounters and how that impacted in certain ways the way women were managed and handled. And with it, the public reduction of women's Utu, and as a consequence, society's Utu. For Maathai, environmental degradation and its effects on the continent of Africa were merely the symptoms of something more substantial. Growing into adulthood, she had observed the depletion of the lush greenery and streams of her childhood, and later as a scientist, understood this as a function of human interference. With this evaluation, she promoted the idea of focusing on the triggers of disempowerment, poverty, lack of water, failing food security, poor health, and general letdowns, among other challenges, which disproportionately burdened women. As part of this reflection, Maathai placed responsibility at the feet of the citizens. Largely, however, she tended a situation instigated by external forces. Observing that large-scale destruction of forests was not the work of the often marginalized people who lived near them. The poor people who lived around forests, marginalized from control of the operations of modernity, were not the ones destroying the forests. They were just the ones most affected by it. Maathai highlighted these continued effects of colonialism's estrangement of the people from the environment as a key root of the disempowerment for women. I offer one of her illustrations here. The introduction of the title deed land ownership in Kenya and the institution of a cash crop economy occasioned destruction of the environment as well as redistribution of control over resources. It also restructured food and environmental wisdom. Among other foundations, the cash crop economy shifted opinions on the desirability of particular crops and degraded the centrality of subsistence farming to many agricultural cultures which women initially controlled. Maathai captured the double effect of embracing a heavy cash economy on women. It at once disparaged the resources they controlled, decimated their environments, and started the process of devaluing their labor. This abrogation of women's productivity and resource management corroded society's regard for their equal Utu socially, politically, economically, redefining women as the weaker sex. Some of these observations have been made elsewhere. What Maathai adds to the debate is the denaturing of the environment, something indigenous systems protected, as attached to the denigration of women's Utu, and consequently their societal contributions and societal location and value. As a consequence of colonialism and this alienation from their land, a process of dehumanizing certain bodies was actuated. Along with losing their land, colonial subjects also experienced a reassignment of identities and ranks in their new societal order, what Maathai outlined as a form of eco-racism. With these conditions, Eurocentric binary lenses of engaging the world generated hierarchies of bodies and entities where white was better than black, man better than woman, human better than nature. The environment. The humans could therefore manipulate and use their environment in any way that suited their interests. Such differentiation of entities in an environment breeds a lack of sensitivity to the interconnectedness of the different parts of that cosmos and its ecosystems. Through this lens, Nature and human bodies were viewed in terms of monetary potentials. Trees, for example, simply became timber, and elephants were viewed as a source for ivory. Also, profitability of male bodies and labor versus women's bodies and labor in maximizing profits from the environment came to play. Having thus othered the environment, deference of forces of nature dwindled, and with it, the people's Utu. African communities preserved natural environments and heritages because they realized the connectedness of their lives and humanity to that of the forest, sacred groves, sacred mountains, sacred mountains and other environmental entities. And they were not looking at natural resources and people and seeing money. Indeed, Maathai often raised the question of whether culture was the missing link in Africa's challenges with development and equity. Eurocentric othering, bent on convincing Africans of the inferiority of their environmental cultures and treatment of bodies, helped tarnish indigenous ways of knowing and doing in common psyche and practice. And this, as identified earlier, contributed to women's loss of power and control. This assault on women's autonomy and the devaluing of their labor and productivity contributed to debasing of knowledges and technologies controlled by female members of society. The Greenbelt movement sought to refabricate this control of resources and knowledges for women as a route to women's empowerment and rebalancing societies. For Maathai, the salvation of women and all human beings and their future world lay in honoring their inherent dual respect with the environment and the land. People taking care of the environment so the environment can continue to return the favor. She argued that most conflicts, which are simply struggles for control of resources or a reaction to diminishing natural resources, heightened women's struggles. Slide, please. Conceding the political, economic, cultural, and social value of the environment and how individuals can deploy environmental spaces and actions to negotiate and bargain authority and power positions underlines environmentalism's political facility. Tree planting and environmental protection is in this way conceptualized as a politically palpable process that can establish or restore security and balance, not just to the environment, but to humans' organizing of society. Therefore, the restoration of environments and institution of environmental justice happens hand in hand with the restoration of Utu, especially for the oppressed. For Maathai, holistic environmentalism, the pursuit of environmental restoration and justice is inseparable from that of Utu Ubuntu. And both are inseparable from realizing equity in society. Having historicized environmental degradation and its attendant ills as a function of the failure of the colonial and the modern African states, she contemplated how replenishing environments could combat the resulting economic, social, political, cultural injustices on many levels. Holistic environmentalism, as conceptualized by Maathai, inspires and demands consciousness raising, self-empowerment, self-betterment, and a spirit of service and volunteerism. It is from this bigger picture perspective that Maathai defined environmental, political, and replenishing as political action. She referred to the Greenbelt movement tree planting as, quote, a symbol of our defiance, end quote. She illuminated, quote, ordinarily, no one should be bothered about a bunch of women trying to plant a tree. But it is what else the GBM family championed that was threatening the fight for human rights. Thus, restored equity, societal balance, and women's access to functioning natural and social environments characterized Maathai's decolonial eco-agency. I would like to speak for a moment on what I call decolonial eco-agency and unbowed, a term I borrow from Maathai, unbowed personhood. I define decolonial eco-agency as the capacity to holistically harness immediate cultural, social, and natural environments as a pathway to economic, social, and political empowerment. Slide, please. Maathai offered a deeper environmental dimension to the beingness of the human, arguing, quote, "In degrading the environment, therefore, we degrade ourselves and all humankind," end quote. Slide, please. To wit, damage to our humanity happens at physical, psychological, and spiritual levels when our environment is mutilated. In such a reality, it becomes socially and politically acceptable, even expedient, to disenfranchise others, especially when we are fighting for ever decreasing natural resources. This stresses the criticality of human beings' appreciating the coadjuvant nature of their relationship with the environment so they can develop appropriate ways of interacting with that environment. Maathai proffered that the relationship between humans and the environment across cultures has always had deeply spiritual dimensions. She defined what she called the source, a place of knowledge and awareness, which should inform how human beings interact with their environments. This association between the environment and the human is sacred and symbiotic. Recognizing the social and spiritual value and the interconnected needs and contributions of different components of ecosystems promoted the idea of seeing the earth as one self-sustaining organism, with humans as just one functioning part of what makes up that organism. Being a part of an organism indicates that their true nature, humanness, utu, ubuntu, is locked into how the rest of the body performs. Indeed, to disrespect or degrade the organism is to do the same to the self, one's own utu. With the erasure of respect for the interconnections of the source of things, human beings have constructed a false reality and belief in their absolute dominion over nature. Maathai shed light on how this misstep has compromised the capacity of human beings to appreciate their dependency on their environments. She made an astute observation underscoring human beings' vulnerability and dependency on the other parts of the organism and the earth. Slide, please, and I'll pause so you can read this one for yourselves and take it in. Thank you. Recognizing this susceptibility humanizes the human in enhanced ways and also underlines the human being's communion and their reliance on each other and on nature and the preservation of that nature for each other. The very essence of the philosophy of Utu, Ubuntu. Respecting each other's Utu and working toward equity therefore starts with respecting the environment and each other's access to it. Women's rights are therefore not seen as women's issues, but society's and the universe's issues. Such an approach that recognizes the significance of the contributions and powers of every member of society in preserving our social, political, cultural, physical environments and the significance of contributions and powers of every member in those ways fosters equal respect for all. Utu and certain indigenous wisdoms ensure the people's protection of the environment for each other, which in turn sustained them. For women, this meant they could supply their families' needs and had resources to expand. And one draws attention to women's role in the in the home in many societies as the people who oversaw medication, education, market spaces, but really in the home, the resources they controlled took care of what many institutions take care of today. People go to school, women took care of that. People go to hospital, women took care of that. People go to dinings or hotels or whatever, women took care of that. So a lot of the functions around the house that really made it a home that people lived in and connected to the environment were controlled in enhanced ways by women, which enhanced their power within the home. One example of this kind of reclamation of African personhood and doing lay in the relationship between the mother and the environment. Maathai aligns the idea of many African scholars who have focalized maternal power in their work. What she adds to the debate is the eco angle. Remember her position. The women had lost opportunities to leverage the environment to provide for the families. Thus, their immediate anxieties were rooted to a large extent in their responsibilities as mothers, individually and collectively, their mothering and mother work for their families and their communities. This simple insight illuminates connections between the challenges experienced by the human mother and the solution Mother Earth. The protective and productive relationship between the two is symbiotic. She offers her own narrative to celebrate maternal capacity to sufficiently provide for children from the bounty of Mother Earth. She shares the Gikuyu community's practice where upon birth of a child, they'd be introduced to the land. Slide, please. Other mothers brought to the birth mother green bananas, sweet potatoes, and blue purple sugarcane. To complement this bold harvest that connects the work and bounty of Mother Earth and that of human mothers was a lamb fatted of a month for the occasion. The new mother chewed the roasted bananas, potatoes, and lamb's meat, and the raw sugarcane each in turn. She would then feed some of that juice from that effort to the baby as the baby's first meal. Per her analysis, the initial establishing of all human beings' connection at birth to the land among the Gikuyu was a practice managed by women performing as mothers and other mothers, not just of the individual born, but of the community and the land. With this narrative, welcome Themba, with this narrative, Maathai placed Earth Mother and human motherhood at the center of life and survival, wholeness and wellness of society. She thus pressed the importance of respect for both mothers. Read here mother as a collective, but also note that she did not think of motherhood as purely gendered, as spiritually and practically necessary for survival. She highlights the presentation of mothers as guardians of and transmitters of that power through generations. Mother Earth protects the human being if the human being protects Mother Earth. Maathai further articulated how indigenous technologies and knowledges of women, some of which they use to sustainably manage the environment for food, medicine, fuel, spirituality, and other bases, can afford empowerment and reclamation of not just maternal power, but women's power in general. It is this empowered body, irreplaceably located as sacred co-deliverer of life, as the only vessel through which human life entered the world in indigenous societies, that also gives it its capacity to influence change and respect attached to it. It's not about being woman. It's about occupying a role and identity in society that is respected for very particular and specific reasons. Thus, it's simply about being human. Active self-defining and a return to indigenous ways of doing would reconnect African humans to their environments. Maathai conceptualized empowerment approaches for African people, including women, as innately eco-friendly. Thus, philosophies and practices of empowerment must intersperse ecological and womanist concerns. Indeed, following her attendance of the United Nations Women's Conference in Mexico, Maathai argued that destroying environmental resources was a direct attack on women's rights. A restoration of women's rights must be eco-informed and eco-directed. Eco-agency, augmented by female identities and bodies with protest power, and authority to control some resources and knowledge, disrupt structures of patriarchy at its very roots. The power of decolonial eco-agency as a principle lies in its inclusiveness and accessibility. Like maternal power, it is accessible to women collectively. Maathai elucidated, for example, on tree planting, a solution to women's challenges did not require a degree, just bodies and understanding of their environments. Slide, please. On NPR, in an interview with Tony Cox on 22nd December 2004, Professor illustrated the uncomplicated nature of this kind of revolution and its inclusivity, stating, quote, "There's a lot we can do with our hands and don't need technology and do not need support from the government or outsiders, just mobilizing our physical energies." As she stated, none of us is so useless that we cannot improve the environment in which we live and thus our own fates. If my brother, you could just go through the next 3 slides and pause for people to read. Allow me to end with a few more quotes on decolonizing our approaches to the study of our environments and identities and centering Utu versus our different identities, and invite you to question how you are doing this in your own work. Indeed, as I stated earlier, in lieu of questions, while I could respond to some, I would really welcome that people share their own experiences of applying decolonial approaches that Maathai spoke of in their work, so we can learn from all our practices. This follows Maathai's ideals of moving beyond ideas to establishing pathways to praxis. It is the Maathai way, and it is a way to disrupt and decolonize the Western mode of one-directional learning or teaching and honor other knowledges in the room and other practices in the room. The decolonial way is that we are all active learners and teachers at any one time, including this moment in time. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Professor MUHONJA. Wow, wow, wow. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for teaching us the Maathai way. I'm going to open up the platform now for people to share their experiences, as you have already asked us to do, as well as if there are any questions. But really, as you say, we are all learning from each other. And so in really trying to be as true as possible to the Maathai way, may we share experiences and all learn from each other. Thank you so much.
And my brother, you may unshare the slides. Thank you.
Okay, if anyone has a question or would like to share experiences, you can also raise your hand if you are in the Teams meeting. I'm not seeing any hands for now. Please assist me, colleagues.
Maybe I'll say something.
Prof. Motsa, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry to jump the gun. I know that Prof wanted to engage more with the students. I simply just briefly wanted to share a cultural practice of Abanguni in Southern Africa of linking with nature through what we call rituals. For example, the girls go to the river to get the reed, umhlanga, and take it to the royal palace. It's not for men to watch, but it is for the Queen Mother to actually engage with the girls in matters of social
decorum, matters of behavior, and how they can sustain themselves. But more than anything, to inculcate the Abanguni myth that they came from West Africa around the Delta, where there is a lot of water and some other minerals. So that reminds the girls of Abanguni, particularly Amazulu and Emaswati, of their origin. But more than anything, they also respect nature, because that is the plowing season where nature must be preserved and respected. But with the passage of time, it has become diluted. Sometimes even ruling monarchs don't understand what it is all about. It is not about men gazing. It is about women and procreation and their role intertwined with nature. I just wanted to echo that and say thank you very much, Prof, for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I also saw another hand from Josiah. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you so much, Prof, for the presentation. I just want to share experience here in Nigeria, especially from the southeastern part of Nigeria, where a child is born, be a male or female, the umbilical cord is used in planting the tree, particular economic tree, in order to sustain the ecosystem. So, but that was during the pre-colonial era, but this time such culture is fading. I think there is a need. I really key in what you have about bringing back culture. I really appreciate the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you for sharing your experience from Nigeria. We also have Monica Nguni. Please go ahead. Monica, you're muted.
Thanks, Chair. This has got nothing to share my personal experience of Abanguni, but I'm actually highlighting the issue of the Native Land Act of 1913 that engineered poverty to a Black South African, majority of South African. And most of them find themselves wanting and not having access to sanitation, having no access to water. I mean, we've just seen the challenge of, I know that it is some kind of a very important issue. It's very historical what happened in Limpopo, where a woman was denied, or not even denied, embarrassed that she was doing a hysterectomy in South Africa, which is yes, she's not South African, but this was quite a very sensitive operation, which will position the woman to be a better woman so that she can contribute as, a woman that is past the, reproductive stage. So we find ourselves having systems that are still hostile and which are not naturally the South African, the African way of doing. But this is the context that we find ourselves in South Africa, more especially in big city. The story of Untutuwo Shoba, who killed Utsekhofatsu's Pule for carrying his child. This man hated Utsekhofatsu for, why are you bringing this child as a woman? I've got other women. So all those challenges of violence, of being denied access to land, makes it difficult for women to embrace the issue of land. And never mind that a lot of women still don't have access to land ownership. If you've got a brother, the brother takes it all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Prof. MUHONJA, would you like to reflect on the comments thus far?
Oh no, I agree with all of it. It's it always fills my heart when I speak to populations that I make a lot of presentations in the West, but when I speak to my people, no hurt to anybody else. There's a way we communicate the same language, and there's a way I hear what they're saying and agree with them. And also, to the last speaker's point, the fact that we continue, even though this land issues that happened in Kenya, in South Africa, all over the continent, even though this was way back, you know, you're talking turn of last century, and then through the early 20th century, we still are dealing with those issues today, because even if you give fair, even if you decide that women can own land, well, they don't already. They don't have, no, people would have had to have land to hand over to them. But if that ownership was already taken away from you and you're already separated from it, unless you have some family member that has something to give you, then you have to figure out how to find money to buy land. And to add to what she just said, most women don't have the economic wherewithal to sort of decide, I'm going to go and invest in a piece of land that I can use to feed the people and that my people. And so that becomes one of those questions that it has to happen at a systemic level where we're changing and helping women, but can it really happen with the government? Like she says, the government, she says, we live in where everybody's trying to feed themselves and grab a little more land that they do not need any extra of, instead of figuring out how to then distribute this to people who might actually use it actively. And so continually, to the point of Ms. Langa and others who spoke earlier, we continue then to see the reproduction of the suffering of women that often we forget is so deeply connected to environmental segregation and environmental alienation from it, that if you just gave them land, they might be fine. So the question becomes, where do we go from here with the circumstances we have economically and politically, and how can those be reversed to help women and reconnect them to the environment? I think somebody else had their hand up.
Thank you so much, Prof. May I kindly ask that, I think it's Temba Chuma, please may you switch off your video? Thank you. Prof. Hlabangana, I did see your hand up. I didn't want to leave you out of this conversation. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good evening, comrades and compatriots. Indeed, Prof. MUHONJA has bequeathed us with a mouthful. I don't even know where to begin, because by centering the works and the life works in particular of Mama Maathai, she's reminding us that she also had something to say to us in the academy, to say that if the education that we purvey, that we inculcate, that we swear by, that we spend our lives purveying, if it is divorced from the land, then it amounts to nothing, because in that way, it perpetuates and normalizes this dispossession that Monica so eloquently spoke about. So I think for us, this is a crossroads in which we have to really think about whether the education that we spend our lives inculcating and cultivating do bring people back to the land, and in that way work against the erasures and the trauma that has been visited on women in particular, but on marginalized people in general. So by saying that education, if it does not make a commentary on land, it is worth nothing, I think it was a challenge to us. And I also wanted to really underscore this very big point that could go unnoticed that Prof. MUHONJA made, which is to say that from a capitalist colonial purview. When one sees land, one sees a plot. When one sees wood, they see timber, something to then commercialize and then, make money out of, make economic sense out of, which does not necessarily translate to humane sense. And I think as a university, we are really, once again, being called to really think deeply about the kinds of languages that we have and that we imbibe and normalize. In particular, I want to pay tribute to a very small point, but a very important one that was made by Prof. Ramos, who said that it must really be a degenerate system that sees people and call them human resources. It is in the same vein that Prof. MUHONJA was saying, and I think it behoves us as scholars, in particular as scholars at UNISA, with the mission and vision that we have set for ourselves, to be very careful in the language that we normalize. So I really wanted to say that this was indeed a feast that we will continue to derive much life from. Thank you, Prof. MUHONJA.
Thank you so much, Prof. Shabangana. Are there any other reflections, questions from the floor? We're also waiting for some questions. Kerubo, please go ahead, followed by Dr. Magadla.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Thank you so much, Professor MUHONJA, for a wonderful presentation. I really love the fact that you've highlighted the issue of identity and awareness of that identity. As we noted from some of the quotes that you shared from Professor Wangari Maathai's work, she spoke about know thyself, who we are. The way we identify has a great impact on in the way we show up and our understanding of our place in the world. You had asked us to share about our work. I'm also very interested in the African philosophy of personhood, of Ubuntu, Utu, and from the Abagusi people of Kenya, we call it Obomwanya Bantu. And I really frame this work in the context of leadership, transformative leadership, in exploring how the level of consciousness that we have about who we are, or our awareness of who we are, as inherently having Utu, Ubuntu, or Obomwanya Bantu, really informs the way we interact with ourselves, with others, and with nature and the broader environment. So I just wanted to really appreciate you and highlight the issue of, not really the issue, but the importance of understanding that this work also is about valuing diversity, the diversity of the different gifts and contributions that we bring into our world and our environment, other beings, the nature, other people, bring to the world. But most significantly is that interconnectedness, that we are one, individualized, and showing up in different forms. But with that understanding, then we move away from reductionist, separationist ways of being, wanting to dominate, the environment, dominion over the world and our nature and other people. So Utu, Ubuntu, Obomwanya Bantu really helps us remember, bring together the different parts of who we really are as one that we have forgotten. So thank you so much. This was wonderful. Asante sana. Biamono.
Thank you so much. Dr. Magadla?
Thank you so much, Sibusiso, and thank you, Prof. MUHONJA. This has been such a treat, such a wholesome, expansive way to close off this month. I don't want to preempt some of the reflections I'll make later. I just want to accept your invitation about some of the strategies, some of the things that we're exploring, that we are daring to do in our classrooms. And one of the things that I've been trying to do at Rhodes University in politics and teaching international relations has been to do it, to think about many of the key concepts in isiXhosa and what that does to those terms. And a lot of that has also been influenced by what the mainly Nigerian sociologists have done with Igbo, with Yoruba, which has been transformative in how we think about gender. So I really appreciated that, towards the end, one of the slides, talks about, Maathai's, reflection about language. And of course, I love in the book, the journey of Maathai from Mary Josephine to Wangari speaks about the significance of language in who we are and how we see ourselves in the world, how we interact with the world. And I love that you always use the word world sense instead of universal. The historian in the Eastern Cape, Noma Thamsanqa Nqadisane, troubles even our acceptance of the term universal as Africans. He says, we have a world sense, and we come from a world where we really see the world as multiversal. So the world comes in all these various forms. And when we take ourselves seriously in our own languages, we have that gift to offer in how we think about the world. So for instance, in international relations, we talk about sovereignty, we talk about anarchy. And I say to these African students, but you come from a world sense of Ubuntu. It's not a mistake that the South African government has adopted this concept of Ubuntu diplomacy, because it comes from us, and it says it doesn't only serve us as South Africans, it can actually be of service. It is what the world needs, versus this very individualistic way of looking at the world that dominates international relations thinking. So I have really, gone back to the beginning to think, especially in the Eastern Cape, where most of the students have access to the language. They speak isiXhosa. So if they begin from their own language, what can that do in how they think about international relations? And in what ways can that really, in the future, can move us beyond just a mere critique of Eurocentrism and to diversify? And one of the colleagues at African Languages, he said to us, looking at our disciplines in our own languages can also liberate some of these terms. And one of the things that students find exciting is when you think about even the category of woman in isiXhosa, there's no broad agreement. You can say umfazi, but is umfazi a single woman? Is it a married woman? We can have an intellectual debate about that. Abantu umntu wasekhini, then it can become this lively intellectual engagement when we begin from where we are and look at the world as they do elsewhere. I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Monica to also give some thoughts, and then we'll ask Prof. MUHONJA to give us her reflections. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you so much. As we are reflecting on this subject, I'm asking myself, why do we continue to read the Bible as women? Because, if you look at some of the clauses that are written in the Bible about women, they are so derogatory. You find a very, very strong woman married to a man with a soft head. But if you go into the, marriage ceremony, this soft-headed man, if there's anything like that, has to be continuously the head of the family. So I find the Bible as a text in many instances, more especially to Black women, very, very oppressive, because it has taken away the power that African women had. But now you find that we happen to be the supporters of this Bible. We happen to be supporters of church if you look at the amount of land which the Catholic Church owns in South Africa, I always ask myself, how did we allow these people? Every corner where I live, there are 4 Catholic churches. And what is interesting in some of these the so-called suburbs, you struggle to get a Zulu, Catholic church. You have to go either to an Italian one or a French one or something like that. If you want to go to an African Catholic church, then you have to drive to the township, which I find very strange after such a transformation. If we do not look at the church as a very oppressive struggle, because language was generated in church, for it to go to society, it started with the arrival of the Ama missionaries, and they started putting words in our mouths, words such as uNkulunkulu. uNkulunkulu is actually a fanagalo, let's say, big, but we have embraced that as like umvelingane. So those are some of the questions that we do not want to really confront as women, so that we actually do not have appropriate language to engage in these very, very robust dialogues. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Prof. MUHONJA, your reflections before we ask for one last round of questions?
No, I'm actually just loving the sharing on the table. So I would rather not interrupt it, and I would love to come back and have some more conversations. And this just proved to me that, as I said, I'm going to make a trip down there next year. But I really am loving this, and I don't think anybody needs to hear from me anymore. But unless we're trying to fill up time, because I can talk. I would say though, before we go to Brother Itu, that it would really, to the statement of the person who just spoke, the 2 people who spoke before, the sisters who just spoke before me about language, we do need to stop talking about things our people do as traditions. My grandmother knowing how to put water in a pot to chill it, that's science, that's technology. People knowing how to use granaries and put certain ash on it so that it does not, the maize or the beans or the grain do not go bad. That's science, that's technology. I think about everything my grandmother did, and there's an absolute scientific or legal reason to it. Taboos, for example, I have an article coming out on taboos and how taboos were not some fantastical thing, but rather really a tool for self-policing in society. So a lot of the things our people did was science, and we need to start using the right terminology, indigenous technologies, not traditional practices, because I don't understand how when it's done, salt, tenderizer, I can mention preservative. I mentioned 4 things that do what Munyum Kereka among my people did, which is this ash, water that you strain ash through from certain plants, and it tenderizes, it salts, it preserves it. We need 5 things now to do what that one thing did, but we still would call that a traditional practice and call the production of salt in industry technology. And so the language, to speak to what my colleague said earlier, really is at the core of what we do. And if we shift nothing else, we might not have power to give people land, but if we shift nothing else, we have to change the language we use to talk about ourselves. And so I thought I'd just put that out there, and thank you all for wonderful stuff. But I see my brother Itu's hand is up, so.
Please go ahead, Professor Mutwagai.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, my sister BESI. I think when we were reflecting about this, this is exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to do perform epistemological disobedience, to challenge the manner in which we think about doing academic work. And the importance of linking up with where we come from and understanding that we are scholars not because we subscribe to Western epistemologies, but we are scholars because we are grounded on African epistemologies. And it is this African epistemologies that give us a lens to which we ought to be doing our analysis. And as you were talking, I began to reflect about when are we going to begin to stop using the concept of university in a context of Africa, which in a way presupposes one form of knowledge system. When are we going to begin in our own curricula to begin to see the works of Professor Maathai coming through and permeating through in order to not to engage on issues that are peripheral, but on issues that are very, very important for us as Africans, and that issues that will begin to say we as human beings were all equal because we embody humanity. And so I think I'm appreciative of the conversation, and I do hope that as the Institute for Gender Studies we'll continue to have these conversations in order to de-link and in order to break the boundaries, the colonial boundaries that have continually made us to believe that we ought to be thinking in a particular way. And, you know, I'm appreciative, my sister BESI, for that. And, you know, I do hope that next time you will come and we will spend a week together and more so to engage with students and colleagues. Like she said at the beginning, we are planning on a bigger project between the Institute for Gender Studies and her office in the James Madison University, which will become a very powerful project aimed at one thing alone: excavating the African indigenous knowledge system and putting it at the center where it's supposed to be within the epistemological paradigm. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give one more round of questions, final round. Is there anyone who would like to share?
Are there any students in the room? I'm really curious. Are there any undergraduate, graduate students in the room?
Should be. There we go. Michelle, please go ahead. Michelle, you might be muted.
Sorry about that. Good evening. My name is Michelle Bexiger, and I'm doing a PhD Gender Masculinities with the Sociology Department at UKZN. And I'm absolutely delighted with this dialogue. It couldn't have come at a more timely moment. I'm African through and through. I've lived in 3 countries in Southern Africa, born and bred in this wonderful, wonderful environment. And my active participation in what it is you're trying to do is very, very important. So I thank you for this platform, and I would like to do this more than once a year. I think it's very motivating and encouraging, because PhD and any other research postgraduate can be a very lonely journey. And as voices, as a collective of the 44 people here, I have found it so inspirational. And I know I'm stating the obvious, but if we could do as Prof just suggested, create a narrative and a constant dialogue on this, it would be something which once a month or every 2 months we could refer to and have a collective forum as to our progress in this journey. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Themba Chuma, please may you mute yourself as well as remove your video, sir.
Sorry.
Prof. MUHONJA, I'm going to ask for final reflections before we move to Dr. Magadla.
Well, I can't wait to, after the first things, after what she said before, I can't wait to hear what their next statements are going to be. But I did want to respond to the last person who spoke, who's the student, and actually just directly invite Professor Itumeleng and say, can we perhaps just, between your institution and ours, can we, outside of Women's Month, can we plan something else for next year that we can co-sponsor? So I just wanted to end up by saying James Madison is committed to this work and that we would love to have an ongoing partnership on this particular subject going forward. We talked before about it and we were really moving ahead, but to hear him say, we're going to do this, I said, yes, we are. Let me put my agreement on the table. We are going to do this together. And so to the doctoral student who just spoke and others, if you're looking for mentorship, if you're looking for people to speak to who are doing this kind of work, we're happy to bring them to the table. But I just want to honor everybody who spoke today and shared of their work because I have learned so much. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. In the interest of time, we're going to move on with our program. I'm now going to call upon Dr. Siphokazi Magadla, who is a senior lecturer and head of department in political and international studies at Rhodes University. She teaches and researches on war and militarism in Africa, as well as gender and the armed struggle in South Africa. Over to you, Dr. Magadla.
Thank you so much, Sibusiso, for this opportunity. And I would be so keen if you kept your camera on. It's so weird to just speak to these blank faces. If you don't mind, if I put that pressure on you as the person who's chairing. Oh, thank you, Prof, for switching yours on as well. I really, as I said, I loved listening to you today. And these words, Maathai's words, if we degrade the environment, we degrade ourselves, it really captures this term of eco-agency that you talk about. And it reminds me of Sylvia Winter's argument, or provocation, where she says, if we want to be good men and good women of the Western kind, we will destroy this planet. And so, and that is true. But of course, for me, this happens at a time where there is a public moment for feminism and maybe a public moment for Black feminism, in particular in Africa and in the diaspora. But that public moment seems to be very much entangled with opulence, with what now women who claim feminism and some womanism, they talk of themselves as brands. We hear often of brand Beyonce, brand Kelly Khumalo. And that brand feminism, if it is feminism, maybe it's post-feminism, is entirely entangled within a neoliberal logic. So you were asking earlier, are there graduate students here, undergraduate students here? And my sense is that a lot of them who may call themselves feminists, they still aspire for a particular kind of lifestyle. And a lot of it involves flying to Dubai, not really thinking about what it takes, what it has taken to build up that kind of thing. And I speak as someone who maybe also cosigns, because I watch The Housewives of Dubai, but part of it is almost this horrible irony of how did we end up here with this kind of opulence as the standard of the thing that we should desire. So if we are empowered women, we are empowered with our designer bags and our international travel. So there seems to me to be something that we must entangle here. How do we talk about that, this feminism that is very much connected to the environment, that is awake to the fact that we need the environment. And in fact, if we don't take care, if we don't heal the environment, we are destroying ourselves. How do we reconcile this public moment of a feminism or Black womanism with its entanglement with a neoliberal consumption? And I wonder if you have some insights in terms of what do you look to? What are some of the movements that you are looking at, that inspire this kind of very grounded kind of feminism or decolonial movements, that are on the ground, that are really rooted to the ground and not overtaken by vanity, and a vanity that is based on consumption. Then the second point I wanted to make is that, I love when you say that Maathai was very expansive by claiming Utu. She was claiming humanness in its most liberated or democratic form, in the ways in which we understand Ubuntu. So in a way where she says, don't constrain me with this gender logic, that is so entangled with colonialism. But is it not ironic, the fact that when she does that, the African phallocracy, if I borrow from Awino or Ketch, the African phallocracy is very quick to remind her, you sit down, you are a woman. So this same men who claim to be protectors of culture, I know you are saying we must be critical about how we talk about culture, tradition, but those ones who claim it are the same ones who are going to remind this free African woman that in fact you are a woman in the ways in which the colonizer imagined. So I just wanted to think about that, and in a way that what Kize and Seke call a neo-traditionalism, and they say, this neo-traditionalism that dominates African politics, it's very smart. It borrows from all kinds of patriarchies. It borrows from religion, whether it's Catholic, whether it's the new Protestants, new preachers, that, it's very smart in how it borrows. And one of the public moments that I loved in South Africa, and we reflected on this moment when we were thinking about the 30th anniversary of Ifya Maidume's male daughters and female husbands. We looked at the interaction in 2013 between Mandla Mandela and Makaziwe Mandela, the first daughter, and of course Maathai was also the first daughter. I'm happy to declare that even I am a first daughter, and a first daughter is serious business in Africa. So she is the first daughter of the first marriage and the only remaining child, of course. And now she finds herself having to respond to her nephew, Mandla Mandela, who moves graves in Qunu without alerting her. And our own chief, particularly Olomisa, says, well, she's married to a man in Ghana. She no longer belongs to the Batembu. And then feminists have to say, well, if we look at this culture that you claim to protect, Makaziwe, in cultural terms, is Mandla's father. If we don't look at her gender, if we look at her position, she is her father. So in a way, I want to talk about how feminists find themselves in this weird way where we have to consistently remind these African men of this history that we come from, the same ones who proclaim to withhold it. And then maybe I want to finish by thinking about the journey from Mary Josephine to Maathai, and what that says to me, because my issue sometimes with when students come into ideas, decolonial ideas, there's a sense, and I have a colleague who's writing on this who says they almost want to completely divorce. To them, it seems like either there is the colonial legacy, the colonial reality, and then I have found this new liberated Africa, and I can live my life completely divorced. And the truth of the matter is that not really. We're here now. We have to work with what we have, right? And the ways in which you see this in Charlotte Manyamatlake that we were celebrating in South Africa, another first degree, first woman to have a degree in South Africa, Maathai, first PhD, first associate professor, so we're dealing with really geniuses, frankly, but in a way, in their own journey, we see that how the path to decoloniality, it doesn't operate in absolutes. So when one comes into what you call an act of self-defining, it means, of course, you know yourself, but you've engaged with the world. And in a way, you've adopted some practices that at some point you begin to reject. And for me, that's the active self-defining. It doesn't mean you pretend as if it doesn't exist. It does exist, but you have a way in which you respond to the world. And I think her journey really shows us that, you know, what going to a Catholic school did, what excelling in her academics, having that experience of seeing the civil rights movement really shapes her politics. It shapes how she connects with others transnationally. And I think there's value, you know. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you, you maybe to ask to us, you know, how do we think about decolonizing our institutions without assuming that we must be operating in extremes? Because it seems to me that we will burn out if we do that. Sort of accepting where we are, but also knowing that then we are able to actively reject some practices. So I'll stop there and just thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much.
And I would add to your point, that last point, if we're looking for our ways of knowing and doing and thinking to enter and penetrate the spaces that we now occupy, we have to play the game within those spaces. And so unless we're going to be speaking to ourselves, you know, we do have to operate in these spaces and shift them up we can. So I just want to take a moment before anybody else speaks to really thank you and also ask, how can I connect with you? Just thank you so much for your reflections. I just loved it. And one thing too she brought up that I'd love to speak. One thing that what you're speaking to brought up in my mind about the young ones. I have had to come to terms with what the fact that my generation dropped the baton. That I can think about the generation before me, the Maathais, you know, the women of my mother's generation, who really, and it's not just on the African continent, it's globally, who really fought a certain battle that gave us the freedom to speak as gently as we do today about these issues. And I can now point to these young people who are beginning to pick up that baton. I think at a certain point, our generation, because there's a moment at which the baton was not passed on. And I think part of that was my generation, we thought we were living in a post-colonial, we were living in the post-world, and we didn't do some of the things we're supposed to do that generationally we should have passed on. And so what your thoughts bring to me is a reminder for my generation to sort of say, is it too late for us to take on that baton and pass on that conversation to the branded feminists, to the feminists that are rooted and grounded in branding and living this fabulous life? Is it too late, or do we still have a responsibility? Because indigenous-wise, our cultures, it was our responsibility as the Ekoyo, I think the Gekoya want to use the example of Itoeka, which, you know, that passing on of apprenticing the next generation, that as academics and as activists, there was a generation of us that dropped the baton, and there's a new generation picking up, but that we need to take up our responsibility within that. But I wanted to put that on the table and then just thank everybody for an amazing, amazing learning experience for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. MUHONJA. Thank you so much, Dr. Magadla. We could go on and on and on. Unfortunately, we don't have the time. And we thank you so much for your reflections. We thank you so much for what we have grasped today, and just the inspiration to start thinking in different ways about who we are and how to learn and teach others about what we already know. And so at this point, we are going to have a small break as we reflect on everything that we have heard. We have a poem, and this is going to be presented by Miss Natalia Mulibatsi. Natalia Mulibatsi is a South African writer, poet, performer, editor, cultural organizer. She's also a PhD student and a feminist. Natalia, over to you.
Hey, hello. What a feast.
Hi.
What an entire feminist feast. I am so grateful. I'm so grateful to be here. MC Sbusiso, you just completely rocked it, and you forgot to mention that I am within and affiliated to the Institute for Gender Studies, and it gives me so much pride to be part of this family. I'm here to do a poem, but I must say, Professor Mutwagai, the vision, the leadership that you have is, I'm so grateful to you for the big vision that you have. And Professor Zetunkosi, your support is incredible. I could go on and on and on and say the organizing team, Professor Zota Matikane, it's incredible to be here and to lend a 2 cents worth of a contribution, because really it's not much considering the kind of things that we've just heard. And also I want to quickly say, Professor Magadla, at least now we know that we're not crazy. Professor MUHONJA, we know that we're not crazy, because the kind of things that we say, that you say, we can pick up that baton and say, we heard it from you. We heard it from the great leaders, from the great storytellers, from the great academics of our time. So really, to hear you speak, Professor MUHONJA, it is such a privilege. I'm going to shut up on that note and say that eli lizwi lam sisipho esisuka kuni omama, nina abazintsikelelo. Ziyana intsikelelo zemisebenzi yenu. Silapha nje kungenxa yemizamo nemithandazo yenu. Nina bazali bam, nina zinyanya zam ezinesidima, nina ovula kuvaliwe okhanye bumnyameni. Sizisingatha ngezipho zenu, nina oMuhonja, noMagadla, noNkosi, noMutsa Matikane. Nina ndizawuthi amazwi am asisipho esivela kuni, nina obeleka inkululeko. You are the wind beneath the broken wing of my people, singing in the deepest voice of my people. You, a lullaby cusping tears, cusping glory. You, an Amandla song to every child of the storm. Someone said that women like you are the wind, are the wing beneath the broken wing of my people. Another one said that women like you give and give their last breath to ignite fires called revolution. That women like you are the mending season of our aching, even when they force feed you the rules of silence. You speak with your voice and your story to be told in the season of your people, and inside of you reside the melodies of your ancestors, because you are the gift and the dream of our people. You, with an uncontainable wail that grows larger and wider than any tight grip of oppression. You will be the new ways of knowing. You who is same with the moon that is on an orbit of black magic woman wonderment. You will let this world know that you love her more than she loves you, that you carry this world all over your body, your head, your belly, that you caress this world when no one is paying attention, that you are the gift in my bag of dreams and memory through which I will craft tomorrow's songs. Thank you, thank you, thank you again for being this gift. Thank you for being this vision And thank you for today. Thank you for today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Natalia Elilezulam. Thank you so much. Our closing remarks are going to be given to us by Professor Zodwa Mutsa Matikane, who is the Vice Principal Teaching and Learning Community Engagement and Student Support. Over to you, Prof. Mutsa.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Program Director. I wish to request that you bear with me. I hope you can see me. Can you?
Can you still visual?
See? Yes, we can,
Prof.
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, thank you. Let me just ask for your understanding. I am in the middle of a horrible flu. I'm trying to recover. So please just bear with me. Let me start off by saying, Professor MUHONJA, thank you, Siyabonga. Siyabonga. Thank you. That means asante. Thank you so much. I won't even begin to reflect in summary of things that have been discussed. It is just too rich to even start. But let me just say that it reminded me of a saying that an African woman is often not on the right side of history wherever she goes. That reminded us in this engagement, very rich engagement, where very hard issues were raised, heart-rending issues of womanism, of patriarchy and its ills, issues of rebuilding the broken walls, issues of bullying amidst bullying, and also one finding oneself being complicit to GBV, issues of trauma, of the education that makes no contribution to matters of land being our identity as African, because we identify ourselves by the river that we draw water from, the mountain that gets the place where we come from, where we ask Uzalwapi and we say that side of that river, but this land is actually divorced from the curriculum that we study. I know, Prof. and colleagues, we did not say much mentoring the boy child, mentoring the girl, we didn't, but it is all part of what we do. We didn't even say much about the pain that we as women visit on one another. It is so crippling because we are so much part of one another that when it comes, we just get shocked. Can my sister do this to me? We didn't say much about that, but I know that this particular platform is more than capable of dissecting all those issues that cripple our total humanity. You displayed a very, very wonderful philosophy in action, the philosophy of connectedness, Prof. You spoke about, in many ways, the human cycle that touches on human nature, the universe, the animal, the ultimate natural cultural ecosystem, you called it. And I really was urinating in my mother tongue. You couldn't hear me because you just nailed it. This is what we are. And I know, as we discussed briefly, that our languages are very, very rich with idioms and tales that demonstrate just how intertwined we are with nature. It is an ancient, long-standing phenomenon. As you spoke, to my mind came the matter of the tree, the river, the sky, the season, the animal, the child, the elderly, the youngest, blood, the land. These are all characters in the works that we write about as Africans, in the poems that we sing as African, in the issues that actually tame us contain us, if you will. And to some degree, Prof. Hlabangani was actually questioning the matter of these disciplines that are so focused on one thing to the detriment of the other. It's something that is forever going in our discourse. Prof, as a university, we are known to be pathfinders in decoloniality. The College of Human Sciences is actually a pathfinder in South Africa for decoloniality. And I'm very, very happy about this lecture because as a university, we continue to engage these colonial frameworks by challenging the centrality, the so-called central identity, the so-called normative nature of power around us. And this particular cognitive dissonance that Prof. Maathai referred to is the one that propels us all as scholars, as African scholars, to excavate, to confront, to examine, to critique, and to create knowledge for the good of the epistemology of the African, because it is muted. It is always seen as non-existent. But these talks, especially what you shared with us tonight, has actually made it even more urgent for us to remember that ours is not a comfortable journey. We are here to examine without fear. We are here to confront. We are here to critique. We are here to create. Thank you very much, Prof. I have one last sentence to say, and this is my takeaway from you. I quote, "Yet if some of them became extinct, human beings could also die out." That is the best ever. For me, I really want to thank you, Prof. It is true. You cannot ignore the other and hope that you yourself will survive. I close with this word, and I say that on behalf of the University of South Africa, the cadre of scholarship in the University of South Africa, and on behalf of our Vice Chancellor, Prof. P. Lenkabula, on behalf of Prof. Meyiwa, who is the Vice Principal for Research, Postgraduate Studies, Innovation and Commercialization. I wish to thank Professor Zet Nkosi, the Acting Executive Dean. I wish to thank Professor Aim Twahai, the Head of the Institute for Gender Studies, for inviting you. And all the people who have actually, where do I start? Nozukolang, wow, girl, thank you. Matikama, beautiful, thank you. Dr. Sibusiso Mkhwanazi, salute. Dr. Spogazi Magala, salute. Natalia Ndabulela Mtanam, thank you ever so much. And all of you wonderful colleagues, students, and everyone in attendance. The University of South Africa is mighty, mighty grateful to you. The last word, our honored guest. Please do come back. We are waiting. Thank you very much, Prof. And Nkosi, thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Motsa. Thank you so much, Professor MUHONJA, for gracing us with this wonderful first public lecture. And thank you so much for everyone attending. We thank you that we have learned together, we have reflected, and we have been inspired to continue this journey as we continue in life. Thank you again for joining us today, and please go well. Hambeni kahle. Thank you.
Goodbye, colleagues.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Bye-bye.